What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Powerhouse Mentality podcast. I'm your host. I'm Caitlin Kenna-Smith. And in today's episode, we're going to go over a little bit about mental toughness. And just toughness in general. Whether it be physical toughness, mental toughness, it all kind of goes under the same umbrella. And the reason why I wanted to address this is two things. And I feel like I start every podcast off with saying two things. Well, there's always more than one reason to why I want to talk about a topic. Now, the first reason is because I'm reading a book that's called Do Hard Things by Steve Magness. And one thing that I want you guys to always remember is that readers are leaders, or leaders are readers, whatever way you want to put it. Reading is such a powerful tool and such a great way for you to open up your mind, get different perspectives, take in a lot of different information. And again, with information, it's only useful if you apply it, but it's important to read all different types of things, in my opinion, because then you get all different types of wisdom and all different types of perspectives from all different types of people that you can take it or leave it as you will with what's actually applicable to your life or what could actually help you become better. Most of the ideas, a lot of the inspiration and creativity that I get comes when I'm consistently reading. One thing that I always find is if I'm not consistently reading every single day and keeping that commitment to myself, if I kind of fall off track, which I do, and that's one of the biggest habits that I tend to fall off track with because it's easy to do, but it's also easy to make an excuse to not do it and say, oh, I don't have time, I'd rather relax, all these other things. But when I am reading, I find that I'm more creative, I have more inspiration on ideas, and I'm just better at providing value to you guys, which is the most important thing in my life. So that's the first reason. This book has kind of inspired me to talk a little bit on toughness. And the other reason is because it's no secret that mental toughness, grit, resiliency is something that is absolutely trending in our world right now. And people are just looking to become more mentally tough. Because I think that a lot of people are starting to realize that if you do exactly what society leads to be normal or common, then you will be weak. So a lot of people are trying to go outside the box and manufacture toughness and create it for themselves to create more resiliency and become more calloused. So one of the biggest things that I want you guys to remember when it comes to toughness in general is that a lot of us have it backwards. We think that toughness is built through punishment. For example, if you were on a sports team when you were a kid and you would go to practice and maybe you had a shitty game the day before. I remember our coach used to always do this when I was on the JV basketball team, is we would run so many suicides or so many downbacks, like to the point that there were days where he would just put trash cans at the end of the court and say, okay, we're just going to run and, if you need to, here you go. And a lot of people look at that as a way, I'm just trying to, build some grit, build some toughness with these athletes, when in all reality, maybe that's not necessarily the right way to do it. Because is it really truly building toughness, or is it building them to just do things because they don't want to have that bad thing happen? It's a little bit like a negative relationship. When in all reality, toughness isn't built that way. That experience, those runs, those difficult things that we have to go through, it's teaching us and teaching our minds and our bodies how to anticipate and set expectations for when we're thrown in situations that we're going to have to face in life. For example, the military goes through a lot of different trainings, one of them called SEER School, where they're trained in a sense to be put in a really uncomfortable situation as prisoners of war. And it's not just to torture them, and it's not just to become more mentally tough. It's to literally teach them what it's going to feel like if they were ever put in the situation where they are going to be a prisoner at war, so that they can stay calm, be tough in that situation, and be able to handle the stressors that life throws at them based on their profession. That's how toughness is actually built, through experience, through resiliency. And one thing that we're going to talk about today is how you can shift your expectations to build toughness. Because perspective matters, and I always say this, perspective drives performance, and here's what I mean by that. When you're faced with a situation, a stressor, if you have you have a choice, right? Because everybody has a different perspective. If you perceive that as a threat or a challenge, that matters. There's a difference. So whether or not you're going to perceive something as a threat or a challenge depends on the perceived demands of the stressor, what your expectations are towards the stressful event versus your expectations or how you perceive that your ability is to handle them. And our ability to be tough starts way before you even encounter any sort of challenge. And it's all about embracing reality and understanding what you are actually capable of. So you have to accept reality and accept what you're capable of. And here's an example, because I think that so many of us have found ourselves in this situation before, because most people who listen to this have worked out or ran a race or done something physically challenging to their bodies in the past. So I know as a CrossFit athlete, I've been in this situation many, many times, more times than I'd like to admit. But your perception of the stressor or of the challenge or of the event or of the threat, whatever you want to call it, matters. Because one, if you go out, we'll use a mile time trial as an example here because it's super basic. If you go out and your pace feels more comfortable than what you expected it to, like it doesn't hurt as much as you thought it was going to hurt, you're going to have more of a positive perspective and you're going to pick up the pace a little bit more. Now, if you start that race, like before you hit the line, you were like, this is going to be easy, I'm going to knock this out of the park. And then all of a sudden you're halfway through the first lap and your heart rate's up. It hurts more than you thought it was going to hurt. It's more challenging. So when you perceive something to be easier than it's actually going to be, and then you get into it and it's more challenging, your feeling of panic and fatigue go up. You start having negative self-talk. You start having negative dialogue. And you're actually more likely to slow down. Again, this happens to me more often than I'd like to admit during workouts. I'm getting much better at it because my perception towards my current abilities versus the perception of what's actually going to happen during this workout are shifting as I'm gaining experience as an athlete. So when I did 24.2 of the CrossFit Open, I did a whole podcast on it about how I wasn't 100% happy with how I did, and I couldn't really pinpoint why. I thought like, okay, I went out too hot. But this is exactly what happened to me. I went into that workout. It was a 20-minute AMRAP of a 300-meter row, 10 deadlifts, and 50 double unders. I went into that workout and I was like, a 20-minute AMRAP, that's a really good time domain for me. I'm more of an enduring athlete compared to a lot of CrossFitters who are really good at just like less than 10-minute sprint workouts, and I'm really good at like longer workouts. So I went into that workout and I was like, deadlifts, rowing, I'm better at double unders than I've ever been. I'm going to kick this workout's ass. And 20 minutes, I got this, easy. And then after the first round, my heart rate was so much higher. It was hurting a lot more than I expected it to. It was way more challenging than I thought it was going to be. So my expectation or my perceived demands of the stressor were not aligned with my ability to handle them. So when you take the actual demands of the stressor plus the expected demands and they align, then we perform at a high level. However, if our perceived demands of the stressor and the perceived ability to handle them are completely mismatched, like one is super high or one is super low, then we don't perform. We panic. We feel more pain. We feel more fatigue. We're more likely to slow down. And that's exactly what happened to me during that workout. My expectations were incorrect and they mismatched with what my actual abilities were. And so I felt more pain. I felt more panic. And I wasn't able to hold myself together. Going into the second attempt that I did a few days later of the same workout, I went in with different expectations because I had the experience and I know what that workout was going to feel like. So I was able to keep my calm and I was able to perform better. So the most important thing here is that we need to be realistic with ourselves and our expectations of the goal or the situation that we're about to get ourselves in. Because if we want to become more tough, we have to improve our capabilities and our abilities. And the only way to do that is through experience, working on things that we suck at, time, putting ourselves intentionally in uncomfortable situations. That's the only way to do it. Action cures everything. Now, when we face a stressful situation, which could be a workout, which could be something at work, our body does its best to prepare us for what's to come. The problem happens when our body starts guessing. It starts thinking, well, is this going to be a threat? Is this going to be a challenge? Remember, because that matters how we perceive it. And if we start perceiving it and guessing that it's going to be a threat, we start getting nervous. That's why you have nerves when you're about to do something big. Because your body doesn't know what it's getting into. It's never been here before, so it's starting to get a little bit nervous. It's guessing that it's going to be a threat. So your body's thinking, I'm going to take less risks, and the only thing that matters to me right now is how do I get out of this situation alive? Now, if your body starts guessing that, okay, this is going to be a challenge, an area of opportunity for me, an opportunity of growth or gain, then you start getting a little bit excited with the anticipation of what's to come. So when your body perceives it as a threat, like I said, you're going to take fewer risks. You almost go into that like fight or flight mode, like I'm just got to do whatever I need to do right now to survive, and cortisol levels actually skyrocket here. That's why you feel nervous. If your body perceives it as a challenge, because you've been here before, because you have the experience, you know what it's going to feel like. Maybe you don't know exactly what it's going to feel like, but you've prepared and put your body in enough uncomfortable situations that you know how to handle it. You know that it's going to be difficult, but again, you know that you can handle it. So instead of worrying about how do I get out of this alive, you're thinking, how do I get out of this and win? How do I win from this? How do I grow and gain from this? And testosterone and adrenaline go up instead of cortisol. So instead of feeling nervous, shaky, kind of brain fog, you can't really get your focus, you feel dialed in and you feel like you can perform. So one of the biggest issues here, like I spoke about earlier, is when we have that large mismatch between expectations and reality. So if we think that it's going to be much easier than it actually is going to be, then we start to panic when we start to realize that it's much more difficult, when it hurts a little bit more. If we get into a workout and we're like, this is going to be easy, and then you're one round in and you're like, oh my God, this hurts so bad. I don't know why it's hurting. Oh no. You start panicking and your performance is going to suffer. So then I know what you're thinking. You're like, okay, cool. So then I'll just go into everything and expect it to be super fucking difficult and that'll fix the problem. Wrong. Because again, it's a large mismatch in either direction. So if you think it's going to be much more difficult than it's actually going to be, then your mind starts to say, well, what's the point? If it's going to be so challenging that I can't even do it, I'm not even going to fucking try. So you go into it with the expectation that I'm going to work hard, but subconsciously maybe you're not giving your best effort because you think it's impossible. So your degree of mismatch determines how your body responds to the situation and how you perform. And now stressful situations, one thing that you have to keep in mind with them is that they truly expose you. So think of it like this. Most people in a normal day-to-day life, they walk around, they have a mask. And this mask hides their vulnerabilities, or maybe it even hides who they truly are. But stressful situations melt that mask away, and they reveal who you truly are. That's why when people are in times of panic, in times where their lives are threatened, where there's hunger, sleep deprivation, a lot of unknowns, and your life is at risk, you truly see who people are. It brings out the worst in people generally. So how do you set your mind up to be able to be more tough in your day-to-day situations where you're faced with challenge. So the first thing you have to do here is you have to acknowledge that something is going to be hard. If it's going to be hard, acknowledge that it's going to be hard. Don't try to lie to yourself and tell yourself it's going to be easier than you think it's going to be just to make yourself feel better, because once you get into the challenge and it feels much more difficult, you're going to fall apart. So you have to set appropriate and authentic goals for yourself. So setting appropriate goals, understanding and facing the reality of your current capabilities in whatever that avenue is. So for myself, I set appropriate goals when it comes to my CrossFit. But I also set authentic goals. So goals that I actually want to accomplish. Not what a coach wants me to do. Not what my husband wants me to do. Not what my parents want me to do. Not what a friend wants me to do. The goal that I want to accomplish. Because the reality is, if you're doing something for somebody else instead of you, you're not going to be able to follow through with it. You also have to be able to define expectations, like we've been talking about the whole time, but also define how you're going to judge how you performed. You shouldn't use placing as a way to judge yourself. If you placed 5th out of 10th out of 10 people, that doesn't matter as much as how you judge your effort. Did you give your best effort? That's all that matters. Because that's something you can always control. You're never going to be able to control the placing because you don't know who the fuck's going to show up that day. You don't know who the fuck's going to be judging. But you can always control the amount of effort that you put into your lead up, into your process, into that event. Next, you have to course correct when you're thrown into those stressful situations. You have to stay calm, and you have to, again, be realistic with your capabilities and understand that, yes, this is difficult, but you can handle it. And that comes with experience. So that's why putting in the work and preparing for things is so fucking important. Be cocky in your preparation. Fucking prepare. And the last thing is prime your mind. So instead of looking for things as threats, search for opportunities. This is why athletes have different rituals or warm-ups that they do every single time they do the same damn thing. Because they know that this is a way for me to get into a positive mindset before a big performance so I can perform at my best. And the absolute biggest thing I want you guys to take away from this podcast is there's two things. One, your perspective matters. How you perceive a situation matters. And the way you perceive a situation starts before you face the situation through your experience and your work that you've put into your goal. The second thing is toughness isn't built through punishment. It's built through experience, building resiliency. So, I hope you found this episode of the podcast valuable. If you did, please do me a favor, share it, subscribe to the podcast, and do one thing that's going to take you one step closer to where you want to be.